G'day, Anthony Ross here, and welcome to what I believe is our fourth common coach mistake when it comes to trying to help our players become mentally tough. And today, the mistake I want to talk about is when coaches focus on the form of a behavior rather than the function of a behavior. And so basically, when we're looking at trying to understand our players' behavior, there's three important parts to it. Context is when it occurs. The form is what we see, obviously. So a player giving up, a player acting angrily, a player losing concentration, for example. But then the function is the thing that we want to pay a lot of attention to, more attention probably than you are at the moment. And the function is when we ask the question, what is the player's behavior in the service of, or why is it occurring? What's motivating the behavior? And so the important thing here is when we focus purely on the form, or when we are trying to help a player the form of a behavior, so let's just take anger, for example. The problem with that is that players can act angrily for different reasons, or anger can have different functions. So anger may be because a player is just simply caught up in frustration. So they're acting angry because they're caught up in the feeling of frustration. But acting angrily might also serve to reduce the emotion or control the emotion of fear or anxiety. And giving up is very similar. So giving up, we may typically, if we look at the form of a player giving up, we may assume that they lack motivation, for example. But that very same behavior, when we're watching that form of the behavior, it could actually be caused because the player is caught up in the unintentional, helpless thoughts, like there's nothing I can do, for example, and then they're acting based on those thoughts. Or they could be giving up for that same function as anger can serve, where they're giving up to reduce the fear of failure. And so they're actually successfully controlling the emotion of fear through giving up. And so ultimately, like, if we want to be very helpful in helping players understand their behavior, which is always the first step to helping them become more mentally tough, we need to always have in our mind this question of what is the behavior that we see serving for this player. What's the motivation of that behavior? And my one tip around this is that anytime you see a player giving up, acting angrily, using excuses, even losing concentration. So players, the function of losing concentration can actually, if we get to the bottom of it, can sometimes be that it's not necessarily that a player lacks the ability to pay attention well. It's that they may be putting their mind in another place to get away from the difficult internal experiences of competition. And so the one thing I would encourage you to do is, whenever you're considering your player's behavior and the mental challenge that they have, the competitive challenge, to keep in mind the possibility that the function of the behavior is in some way or in some part about serving the function of reducing fear and anxiety. So successfully actually controlling the emotions of fear through these other behaviors, or avoiding the pain of losing, or reducing the pain of potential loss. These are often at the core, in some part, of a lot of the unhelpful behaviors that we see in our players. So I hope you find this one helpful, and I'll be back tomorrow for day 5 for our 5th common coaching mistake that I see when we're trying to help our players get mentally tough. Cheers.